Hello and welcome to this video. In it, we're going to be using RStudio to do basic arithmetic operations, much like how you would use your calculator. So my environment for RStudio may not look exactly like yours, but hopefully it'll look very similar. And if there's any differences, I'll try to point out where those are likely to be. And then I'll walk you through how to do the kinds of arithmetic you're likely to be doing in this class. All right, when you start your RStudio session, you should find a screen that looks sort of like this. You might have an extra window up here on the right-hand side, but we don't need to worry too much about that right now. You may not have this top window on the left-hand side, and I'll show you what that is and how to bring it up in a little bit. But we're going to start just looking in the console, which is one of these four tabs over here on the left, and it's really the only tab that you're going to need as you work in this course. So the console allows you to enter commands and have those run in RStudio just like how it would be done on your calculator. So for example, you could do 12 plus 13. You can hit enter, and that's going to give you the number 25. So 12 plus 13 is 25. 12 minus 13 is -1. And you don't have to worry about this number over here in square brackets. That's just telling us something about the output only having a single value. Sometimes there's things in RStudio you can do where there's lots of different outputs and it numbers them for you, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But the kinds of things we're doing today will only see one number output. So you can just ignore this number in parentheses and in brackets every time because it's not going to mean anything. So besides addition and subtraction, what else can we do? We can do division, 12 divided by 13. And of course, 12 divided by 13 is not an integer. So RStudio is going to round it after it represents 6 or 7 decimal digits here. And that's plenty of precision for anything you're going to need to do in your class. So you don't need to worry about trying to see more decimal digits of accuracy when you get irrational numbers or when you get other non-integers. So we can also do multiplication. And this might be the first one that's a little bit surprising. We don't use the X or the dot to do multiplication with computers. The default is to use the asterisk, which is the Shift 8 on your keyboard. So 12 times 13. And you may have just seen I mistyped the number 13 there. 12 times, and I meant to do 12 times 13, I put 12, but the backspace will allow you to go back and fix your command if you want to. If you want to rerun a command, or if you typed it wrong and you want to fix it, it's nice to know that you can just hit the up arrow to go back to the previous command that you entered. And then you could change it to, oh, I really wanted 12 times 13 and a half. And it'll do that operation for you. So that lets you fix typos really quickly in RStudio. So those are your basic 4 arithmetic operations, but there's others that you'll find that you need to do from time to time, one of which is the square root operation. So one way to do a square root is the sqrt function. So square root of 25, and then you close the parentheses, although thankfully RStudio will auto-complete that parenthesis for you most of the time. So if you just do something like square root 25, it'll close that parentheses, and that outputs the number 5, which is the square root of 25. And you may remember from some previous math classes that you can also raise numbers to powers. So 25 to the 1/2 power is the same thing as the square root of 25. So that's another way to take the square root, raising it to the 1/2 power, but I need that 1/2 in parentheses because of the way orders of operations work. So if I forgot to do the parentheses there, it's going to give me 12.5. It's going to take 25 to the first power, which is 25, and then divide that answer by 2 to get 12.5. You could have also done 25 to the 0.5 power, because 0.5 is another way to represent a half, and that works just fine. You can do cube roots in a similar way. We can go 25 to the 1/3 power, and that's an irrational number. So again, it's rounded after a few decimal digits of accuracy. All right, what other kinds of functions might you see and like to be able to do? Well, you can do things like trig functions, sine of pi over 2. And R knows that pi is 3.14159, so sine of pi over 2 radians. That's of course the same as the sine of 90 degrees. That's 1. So you can do trig functions with sine, cosine, tangent just by typing in what you want that may come up from time to time in your calculus classes, probably not in your statistics classes. Similarly, you might find yourself doing the log function. Log is by default the natural log function, so it's not log base 10. The natural log of 10 is not 1, it's a little over 2. If you want the log base 10 for some reason, which is another thing that's not going to come up very much, then the log 10 is the way to type that. Log 10 means log base 10. So log is the natural log. The exponential function, like e to a power, e squared, is not going to work by default in R because it does not know that the number e is 2.71828. It knows what pi is, but it doesn't know what e is. So it's going to spit out an error message and say, oh, I can't do that. I don't know what e is. But instead, there's a built-in function to do this. It's the exp function. So exp does e to a power. That's the inverse function of the natural log. And that outputs something that's, again, an irrational number. And if you want to check that, you may remember from somewhere that e is about 2.718. And so 2.718 squared, that should be about exp of 2. And again, they are about the same, but of course, they're not exactly the same here because this one's rounded and this one's not. All right, so we've done plus, minus, multiply, divide. Those are your basic arithmetic operations. We've done some powers, we've done square roots, we've done exponentials and logs. The last thing we want to think about is the absolute value function. And you might think you could do that the way you might write it with the vertical lines on either side. That's the way I learned what absolute value was represented as, but the computer's not going to know what that means. It's going to spit out an error message that says, I don't know what you're trying to do here. So instead, to get the computer to do absolute value, it's just the ABS command, short for absolute value. Absolute value of -3 is +3. All right, that's all I have for you. So you should spend some time practicing these arithmetic operations and get good at using R in that way.